Hey, this is Daniel. In this video, I'm going to give you 10 awesome video editing tips and tricks you can use in Adobe Premiere Pro. Let's get started in no particular order with number 1. Time ramping. Time ramping is when you speed up or slow down the rate of the playback of a video clip as it plays in your timeline. Here we have a clip shot at 128 frames per second on my Canon R6 of an aerial performer spinning around on her cloth as I move closer and look up at her with a wide-angle lens. I like this video clip to play in normal speed and then slow down to slow motion and then go back to normal speed. So to do that, have your clip in your timeline and then you'll need to expand vertically the track that your video clip is on. Let me scroll up a little bit. There we go. So you need this to be larger vertically so that you can see and create keyframes for your speed of your video clip. Right click on the tiny little icon on the top left of your clip and go to time remapping. And now the keyframe line here will apply to the speed of your video clip as opposed to the volume, which I believe is the default setting. And now as we change this keyframe line, it will affect the remapping of the time of the clip. So press P for your pen tool and let's draw markers first where we want it to change speed and then go back to normal speed. So I want this to play at normal speed. And then right around here, I want it to slow down to slow motion. So I'm going to draw a dot right there. It looks like a time marker. And then I want it to be slow motion, and then go back to normal speed. That's, I don't know, maybe right here. Don't want it to go too long. Right there. Cool. So now press V to go back to your normal cursor or your moving tool. You can see my cursor up here has changed. And we can grab these different sections of the clip and speed them up or slow them down. So I'm going to speed up this first section up to 400%, which essentially puts it back to normal speed. Because when you're shooting at 128 frames per second, it's basically 4 times slow motion. So if you multiply that by 400% speed, it'll play back in normal speed. There we go. She's spinning. This is normal. And then boom, goes to slow motion. And this will stay slow motion until we get to this point, which I want it to go back to 400%. There we go. We can make that transition a little bit smoother by zooming into one of your transitions between fast and slow. And if you put your mouse over this cursor, you see the little left and right arrows. This allows you to basically create a fall off or I don't know, a crossfade. And you can even change the Bezier curve speed, which is really nice. So there, and let's go to the exit, click on that one and drag that out about the same size. Grab that little curve control and there we go. So let's see what this looks like now. So normal speed, and then it's going to ease into slow motion. That's not very, that was a little bit drastic. Let's make it a longer transition. There we go. It eases into slow motion. And then this is going to ease out. I'll make it even longer. So slow and then ramping up. There we go. Cool. Next tip is enhancing voice audio. I obviously do a lot of videos with my voice in them, such as the one you're watching right now. And I do a few easy tricks, and I have a few easy tricks up my sleeve to make my voice really pop and be clear and loud so that my voice is easy to hear. And here's how I do it. Once you've got your audio synced and in place, go to Window, go to Audio Track Mixer, and make sure your project is selected. I already have it here, so here it is. This is the mixer. So if I press play, you'll see all the channels here. I'm going to turn it up to where the loudest parts of my talking hit around -6. We don't want them to get too close to 0 because then they'll be clipping and distorted. It's relatively simple. I think it'll be a good opportunity to teach a bunch of different techniques. So this is the image that I saw that inspired me originally. It was sent to me by a friend. There we go. Once I've got my level set, I'm going to expand this little arrow up here so that I can see my effects. Here you can add up to 5 effects in your channel. I don't know why it's only 5. It's really annoying, honestly. I'd like to have more. But first one that I make is an EQ, and I use the parametric EQ because it's the easiest to use, and most importantly, it's visual. Yay. So first I'm going to turn on a low clip to get rid of any low frequencies. Then I'm going to boost a little bit of the highs here and the overall high end right there. So it's nice and crisp. I'm going to close that. I'm going to make a new effect, click on that down arrow. And now I'm going to clean up my audio by using the denoise. Open that up and I turn this down to around the second notch right there. That gets rid of any background noise. Then I'll use my favorite plugin here, which is the dynamics processing. Again, most importantly, it's visual. That's how I like to do things. And this works just like the curves in Photoshop or in Premiere. And you can essentially boost your levels and make things really loud and kind of compressed. So I like to usually do something like this, a little bit of a bump in the high end. which means what would have been, say, 40% is now going to be up to 50 or 60% volume. And what's up here, which is usually where I'm talking, is also going to be a little bit louder. But anything past that point is going to curve down and still stay its original volume. You can even bring this down. For anything that goes up over this level, it's going to flatten out and hit at -5. That's totally up to you, but a small curve goes a long way. So now it sounds like this. It was all made in Blender Eevee. Yeah, Eevee. I never use Eevee, especially not for photoreal stuff. But this came out really good. It's relatively simple. I think it'll be a good opportunity to teach a bunch of different techniques. Now you may have noticed things are hitting the red a lot, so I will probably turn this down a little bit. This is the image that I saw that inspired me originally. It was sent to me by a friend. I was planning a composite photo edit for a, yeah, now it's a lot cleaner, a lot louder, and most importantly, easy to understand. Next tip is using bins to organize your video clips. So here I have a wedding highlight project. In this very first root directory, I've got my song and a bunch of different sequences. Some of these are pre-comps for specific uses, but here I have a video folder, and inside this bin or folder, you can call them either one, I have a bunch of subfolders to organize all of my hundreds of clips that I take during a wedding. And this really helps me because as I build my highlight video or any production, I can kind of work through the story of my video project, and I know exactly where those clips should be, assuming I organize them correctly the first time, which I do my best. And that's one of my first steps is I get all my clips into one main folder, and I literally am dragging them over into my bins to organize them all. So if I need a detail shot to fill in a spot, or if I feel like, this certain part of the video, it would be great for a macro or a decoration or a cake video clip, I've got them all right here in the details bin. If I need a nice romantic portrait shot, I got them all in my portraits bin right here. And when you use one clip in your timeline, it lets you know that that clip is currently in the timeline by having this little film strip icon. That means that that clip is used, which means the other ones are not yet used. So I can find one that has not been used yet and drop it in and use it. I say this all the time, but it's true. Organization for the artist is a key to success. You got to know where your stuff is, get to it quickly, and save yourself time so you can get back to being a creative artist instead of looking for stuff you don't remember where you put it. Next tip is toning down the stabilization. Now here's a clip of the couple's first dance. This is straight out of the camera. There is IBIS or in-body stabilization happening that keeps the sensor pretty smooth, but as you can tell, it's a little shaky. I think I was using my 100mm and I was probably in a hurry to shoot this and just really, moving around. So it's not very smooth, not very stable. So if I apply the warp stabilizer, which does an awesome job, I'm going to click analyze here, and it's going to analyze the movement of the camera and the subject, and it's going to basically counteract that with cropping and auto panning and things like that, even rotation and scaling. Let's see how good of a job the warp stabilizer does. It looks a little funky. Now the default settings always seem to be 50% and subspace warp. Now oftentimes I find the stabilizer to go overboard and it's trying too hard. So here is a good tip, is actually to tone it down a little bit. Calm down, warp stabilizer, chill out. So to do that, let's turn this 50 down to 10%. I know it seems really low, but sometimes 5% and 10% work wonders in stabilizer. And the second thing I want to do is I'm going to change this from subspace warp to position, scale, and rotation. Now, subspace warp is actually grabbing all the corners of the photo and it's moving those corners independently to try to stabilize and basically unmove your shot in 3D, but it can't because it's still a 2D video clip. And the results can be pretty wonky sometimes, depending on what your footage is doing. But when you put it to position, scale, and rotation, all it's doing is panning the clip, scaling it in and out, and rotating it to basically do its best to stabilize your motion. Now let's check out how it looks. There's no warpy, scaly wobbliness to the footage, and I like it a lot more. Next tip is using videos as a transition. Here I've got two clips, both shot in 120. As you can tell, I love shooting at 120. And I want to do a creative transition between the two of these clips. I made this black and white animation in Blender, which is going to work as a transition, and we're going to use the black and white values to basically mask between clip A and clip B as a transition. To do that, we need to overlap the two clips, like so, and then put your transition clip on the top. Let's hide our transition animation clip, go to Effects and type in Track, and use the Track Matte key. Double click it or drag it onto the clip you want it to be on. Go to Effects Controls, scroll down to the Track Matte key settings, here it is, we're going to point it towards the channel that has the transition clip on it, which as you see over here is V5 or video 5. So click on your clip again. Here we go. In track matte key settings, Matt is going to look at video layer 5 and composite using Luma, which is lumosity, which is black and white. We don't have alpha data in our transition clip. We only have black and white. So we're going to use Luma. Now let's see what happens as we crossfade over this animation. Now, before we get to see the results of what we've done, make sure that your transition clip is not hidden. So make sure that the eyeball is visible, and let's drag over and let's watch it transition from clip A to clip B using those dots. Now, yeah, not a super cool transition you may use in a real production, but I figured it was a good example to show you what black and white does. Now, near the end of this clip where the animation is pure white, I can still see the bride transparent. That's because the white value of my transition animation that I made in Blender was not pure white. Oops, my bad. But we can fix it by adding a little bit of boost in the contrast. So I'm going to make a Luma curve, double click it, go to Effects Controls, and here we go. I'm just going to drag my white point to make it brighter. There we go. Now the white is pure white and the black was already pure black. So the transition works like a charm. You can find lots of transition video clips like that online. I'm sure you can find some for free if you find the transitions that came with Premiere not what you're looking for. Or you can be extra like me and make your own. Next is the Rate Stretch tool. If you press the letter R on your keyboard, you'll get to one of these 4 tools here. If you click and hold, let's choose the Rate Stretch tool, and this allows you to easily drag your clip's endpoint and essentially stretch it in time. We're not trimming or clipping it. We're literally making it slower or faster. So if you have a clip like this that you want to keep this entire action of this clip in there, but it's not going to fit in the space you have it to fit in, you may want to try stretching the rate, which essentially changes the speed of it, and that will allow the clip to fit entirely within the space you have. Next tip is how to switch between cameras in a multi-camera production. Here I have a rock and roll concert that I recorded with 3 cameras. One was handheld and 2 were on tripods. So here's an easy way to switch between cameras using opacity animation. First, I'm going to expand my video layers so that they're just a little bit bigger. It helps me visualize and see the opacity a lot better. I'm not going to mess with audio, so I'm going to scoot that down and leave a lot more room for all 3 of my video layers. The blue one is my handheld camera. The green one was the Canon R5 on a tripod. And the bottom blue clip is my old Canon 6D, also on a tripod on the opposite side of the stage. So here's how I do it. I'm going to right click on this little icon on the top left and go to opacity and make sure that that is checked. Now I can drag this up and down, and this is essentially the opacity. If I press P for pen tool, I can draw a point and then another point, but this will make a crossfade that I don't want. I want it to be an abrupt cut like I'm cutting between cameras. So to do that, right click on this first point and choose hold. Also, if you drew a second point like I did, right click on that one and choose hold as well. Now, anytime you draw a point, you get this abrupt on or off like automation, and that's perfect for switching cameras. So go through your timeline and choose when you need to cut to different cameras. Up means visible, down means invisible. So right there, when I move my camera, I want that to cut a little bit earlier. So let's zoom in and find where my camera started to wiggle. Right around there. So let's cut earlier. Now it's going to cut to my camera right before I did that wiggle. Cool. Now I want to bring it back and show the drummer again. Oop, no, maybe not. Let's cut down to camera left by drawing a point here, right click on it and go to hold. Now I can draw a cut here. So it's on my camera right. Going to cut to camera left. Maybe I'll bring in my first camera now, right there. Cool. And then as I drop this down, it's going to cut back to camera right, just like that. So using the hold interpolation for keyframes of the opacity is a really easy and visual way to cut between multiple cameras. Next tip is making a whip cut with motion blur. Here I've got 2 clips lined up and I want to do a whip cut, which is when the camera whips to one side and then the next clip comes in with a similar motion. What I'm going to do is actually overlap these a little bit for that transitionary period. We only want a few frames, anywhere between 6 and 3 frames, I think is a good amount of time to do a really fast motion blurred whip movement. To do this trick, we're going to need to use the effect called transform, and we're going to apply it to both of these quickly by selecting both of them, going to our filters, type in transform, and there it is. Double click it and it should apply to both. We can double check by going to Effects Controls, clicking on clip 1. Yep, there it is. And on clip 2, it's there as well. Great. Now we're going to go down to shutter angle and turn this to 180 degrees on both of them. There we go. And now instead of animating the motion of the clip in your motion section, which is normally where you animate motion left and right or scaling, we're going to actually use the transform tool to animate those parameters. We also have some additional ones here, which is really handy. So I want the robot clip to zoom to the left, and then DJ Girl is going to come in from the right to replace it. So I'm going to hide DJ Girl, and right here, I'm going to add a position keyframe right there, zoom in. And then at the last frame, go back one with my arrow keys. I want this to have slid all the way to the left really fast, right? This is happening over the space of like 4 frames. So it's going to be very fast. And look at that. Premiere applies motion blur to it and it looks great. So without my second clip in, this is what's going to happen. Really fast. Maybe make it a little bit longer. Honestly, I'll add a few more frames so it's more visible. You can appreciate that motion blur. There we go. Gonna whip to the left, and then DJ Girl is going to come in from the right to replace it. So we're going to do the kind of the opposite thing with that. So where we want it to stop is on this frame right there. So I'm going to add, I need to make it visible. Turn on my eyeball. There we go. So in my position keyframes for DJ Girl, click add keyframe, and then I'm going to go backwards to the very beginning of it. I'm going to place it all the way over here out of frame. Playing these two together, we have that effect. Very cool, but there is a little bit of a gap in the middle. We can easily cover that up by grabbing our top clip of the DJ and holding Alt or Option on Mac and clicking our left key button on my keyboard, which just slides it by 1 frame each time you click it. So now there's less of a gap in between. You can actually move this a little bit earlier. There we go, 1 more frame, just like that. Really fast. And I think there's just a subliminal amount of motion blur that we can tell, even though it's really fast. You can also use this with a zoom cut, which is a really cool effect. I'll do that now by deleting these keyframes I just made on both clips, select and delete. And on the robot clip, I'm going to add a keyframe for the scale. And then on the last frame of this clip, I'm going to have the scale go up to like 200. A lot of zoom. There we go. And now on our DJ clip, let's make that visible again. We're going to go here and we're going to keep the scale at 100% there. And then as it comes in, we're going to zoom in just a little bit, maybe to 130%. There we go. And it is cutting off her head, so we can have to fix that later. But let's go maybe back to 120. Yeah, still close, but you'll get the point. I found the result to be a little bit more intense if we move these scaling keyframes closer together so that it's essentially zooming faster over a short amount of period. And also I turned up my shutter angle to 360 degrees on both clips, and that seemed to accentuate the zoom motion blur just a little bit more. So let's check this out, see what it looks like. Cool, I like that, except for her head getting cut off. I think that is a nice clip. If you shoot in 4K, you have a lot more leeway with your zoomage so that you're not getting pixelization. Like I could have zoomed this into 200% and maybe even keyframe it up to her face. That could be a really nice zoom cut. Next tip is using Auto White Balance Selector in the Lumetri filter. At this wedding, this interior venue not only was very dim, but had a lot of really bad color. It was very yellow and orange and hard to look natural, but I found that the Lumetri's Auto White Balance Selector to be really handy and save me a lot of time. So here's how it works. Go to a clip that you don't like the color. Let me actually turn off the Lumetri. That's the original. I'm going to delete that one and go to Effects, type in LUM. I have a Lumetri Effects preset that is essentially a blank preset, but you'll probably be finding a lot of pre-made ones. You can just go ahead and double click on load one, go to Effects, click on it, and just click the reset button. That'll reset all the sliders back to 0, which is essentially a blank slate for you to start tweaking. The way to get your white balance really easily and quickly is click on the white balance color picker and select something that is not only white, but medium brightness, not too hot and clipping, but not too dark and shadowy, because either of those extremes will be affected by color cast and other things. So something medium white is the best. Gray is really good as well. And this will do its best to adjust the temperature and the tint to grab a good natural white balance. Now this is a little bit dim. So I'm going to go to my curves and I'm going to boost it with that. I don't like adjusting the exposure slider. I feel that the curves does a better, more natural job at increasing the exposure. That's just my personal thing, but let's check out before and after with the color balance. So before was very red and orange. after it adds a little bit of that natural green, some blue, and it just looks a lot better balanced. You can, of course, tweak this yourself by grabbing and playing with the sliders at this point, kind of doing your own style and color balance on your own. But I found this to be a huge time saver when working with really difficult to balance clips that had some funky colors. Next tip is slip and slide. Let's say you've got a clip that you'd like to adjust without moving up here, adjusting the endpoint, adjusting the start point, moving it back, dropping it, fixing that to make it fit, and all that crazy stuff you have to do. There is a way to instantly slide your clip within its own boundaries to adjust its start and end time. Let me undo all that craziness I just did. There we go. Now let me turn off our warp stabilizer, which keeps trying to recalculate. And let's go over here to our tools. And if you press Y, you'll get the slip tool, and U gets you the slide tool. What does slip do? Well, it keeps the clip start and endpoint in the timeline the same, but allows you to slide within those boundaries how far in or out your clip is. So if I slide all the way to the left, now this is playing up to the end of the clip. That's where I stopped recording. If I do the opposite, click and drag to the right, now it's starting where the clip started, and it's not going to end where I ended because, well, there's just not enough time for that. So you can slide things in and out within their own boundaries, really handy. The other one, the slide tool, which is letter U, basically grabs your clip and moves it and adjusts the other clips next to it. Isn't that cool? Did you know that that was the thing? I literally did it before making this video. Full transparency. Very cool tool right there, slip and slide. And the last tip is looping your video timeline. Early on using Premiere, I found myself really needing to loop a section so that I could really tweak and make sure that I say a transition was good or that the stabilizing was good. And I didn't like clicking on the beginning, pressing play again, going back to the beginning, pressing play again. It got old over and over. So I was like, where is the loop button in Premiere? How does looping work? Where the heck is it? Well, it's kind of hidden. You have to add the button manually to your program or your video player section. So right here, we've got the basic, play, stop, next frame, go to the end point, and all this stuff. But you can see I have a loop button here, and it is added. So over here on the right, there's a little plus button. It says button editor. Click on that, and it shows you all the buttons you do and don't have. And it shows you all the buttons you're not currently using. So the loop button is right here. If you drag it, you can drop it to where you want it, or you can move it back and get rid of it. You can even add an empty space to better organize all the little things you may or may not need: rulers, overlays, overwrite, a record button, make your own stuff that you need. But most importantly, get that loop button in there because it is really handy. I'm actually going to clean up my buttons here because I don't use any of this stuff. There we go. That is honestly all I use. Play, take a picture, and loop. Because all the other stuff that I got rid of, I use the keyboard for. And that's the way it should be. So I'm going to click OK. And now with loop turned on, what is it going to loop? Well, it's actually going to loop whatever is inside your in to out marker, which is a letter I, and then click on the endpoint and press O, in and out. So let's say I want to play a transition between two clips. I'm going to get to the starting point, press I, get to the endpoint and press O. And now if I play into it, it's going to continually loop around this section over and over until I'm done making my tweaks or whatever I want, until I press stop. Very handy for making fine-tuned adjustments to a certain section of your video. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any other helpful tips like these, add them in the comments down below. If I didn't cover anything in enough detail or mess something up, let me know and I'll do my best to help you out. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and have a great week editing.